Hello. So I wanted to talk about some pretty heavy subjects today. And as always, this isn't in the spirit of fear. This is to educate you, to bring your awareness to some things so that we can, better circumvent some of the things that might be used against us technologically. So, I've spoken about this before. Recently, there was a video by Dr. Giordano of DARPA. He gave a talk at West Point. And now there's another video, former CIA and I think the psychologist, Dr. Morgan, who gave another talk at West Point. And it's all about the brain as the battlefield. Now, first let me say this. This isn't conspiracy. This is being taught at West Point. These are the technologies that are being deployed against us. And more so, it's what's being developed by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And I know a lot of people want to, I refer to China as the CCP. They go, oh, it's the People's Republic of China. And I'd say, well, no, because with the amount of people that are abused in China, I assure you, they're not choosing to be abused. It is the Communist Chinese Party that is running things there, just like our nation has been subverted in many different areas. And if you read the post that I wrote, or that I shared under here, Unrestricted Warfare, it's a document outlining how they will see warfare in the future. And it's basically no holds barred. Now, in the two videos, and I'm going to post them, Dr. Morgan and Dr. Giordano, they discuss this. In the one video by Dr. Morgan, he talks about the possession project. What it is the ability that they have to remotely control people's bodily functions, their thoughts. And if you've ever looked into technology and the stuff he was developing back then, we know that the certain frequencies that are launched at people can create everything from euphoria to dread. And so, what has been launched against humanity is on a scale most people can't fathom. And what I would say is a lot of people, they're not going to be able to psychologically cope with this. They will dismiss it. They will, laugh it off, and that's understandable. It's the way that the human psyche works in order to maintain its sanity. I get it. And let me first, again, reiterate, this isn't to create fear. There's a way around this, and I'm going to talk about it. And as always, it doesn't matter so much if we believe in this stuff, if certain government entities believe in this stuff, we're subject to it, especially if it's being deployed against us. Now, Dr. Giordano spoke quite in depth about the brain being the new battlefield, that if they find someone that is a threat, that the ability to launch these types of devices against them to take them out is the way that they would go. And think of it like this. If they start taking people out of reality, neutralizing them, executing them, a lot more people wake up. But if they can get someone to go and act out of character, go into rage, anger, depression, and take the self out in such a way that they behave in a way that people look at it and go, well, whatever they're looking into or believing, I don't want to know because I don't want to end up like that, or they're just crazy. Look at the way that they're acting. So therefore, everything that they're sharing, just ignore it. And this is how reverse psychology works. It's why Trump was used to co-opt a lot of truth. It's nothing new. But, this is also why I say even my UFO experience, a lot of things, I don't know what could have potentially been manipulated and what was real. However, what I do know is how I responded to it made all the difference. Now, people have heard about targeted individuals for some time, and they sounded out there, right? They're deploying these weapons against us, against humanity. Well, if you look at these videos put on at West Point, they openly say, yeah, this stuff is an operation. And if we know China and CCP, well, excuse me, not China, the Chinese people, they're at the mercy of this too. If we know that the CCP is developing these things ahead in some places, and we know that it's all about unrestricted warfare, there's no doubt these things are being launched against the people, in particular to divide and conquer us. Now, you can watch the videos, discern for yourself. As always, don't believe anything I say. Do your own research, your own due diligence. Go within your guide inside, whatever it is that you find peace in. Pray on it, meditate on it, come to your own answers. But here's how I'm going to say the best way to go around this. And you know, I've spoken about this before. If you had watched the Yuval Harari interview or talk that he did at the World Economic Forum, will the future of humanity be human or something like that? And it was all about the transhuman agenda. And they speak in there about understanding people, unlocking people, hacking people, knowing everything from how pliable their sexuality is, LGBTQIA, by the way, to being able to monitor someone. And let's say a leader is giving a speech and everybody's clapping as they're mandated to do in a lot of these dictatorial countries, but they can notice that this person is feeling a different way. Well, then they just remove that individual before they begin to create dissension among the ranks, if you will, and start to get a following. Now, again, there's good guys too. The reason there's good guys too, because I would not be able to talk if there was not. I would not be here, and I don't want to make this about me, but I am going to share my experiences, how to go about this, how to combat it. So, you know, I talk a lot about cultivating character. I talk a lot about emotional discipline, a lot about doing what we can to empathize with everybody, to watch our anger. You know, it's the same thing all sages throughout time have spoken about. Nothing different. But when we make our first priority that, in other words, rather than allowing our anger to take control of us, to enslave us, if we start seeing certain things that they're throwing at us to bring us in such terror that we begin to lose our humanity, if that becomes our first focus to not allow that to happen, then it's very easy to discern when potentially the feelings, emotions, and thoughts coming in are not ours. We can better regulate. We can better take the thoughts. And I spoke about this in my spirituality video about the Neo stopping the bullets, and the bullets actually being what the powers that be are launching at us, which are thoughts and emotions. And I didn't go too in depth about it, but this is what I was talking about, is that from all the psychological operations, all the technologies, everything, if our first priority is the cultivation of grace in the face of great adversity, always coming back to the virtues of grace, whether it, you know, whichever religion you align with, the virtues of grace are usually the same: truth, love, mercy, forgiveness, empathy, compassion, patience, moral courage. You know, the cornerstones of a true spiritual awakening. And let me say it like this. I was talking with a sister this morning about this, and there are two very distinct paths towards ascension. And people talk about the rapture and they talk about ascension, and they think of it in physical terms because we're physical beings and we've been taught to think in physical terms. But first and foremost, those things that we're talking about, the virtues, the emotions, are the invisible. So the awakening process, the ascension process, is first and foremost an inner spiritual process. The rapture of the spirit, being reborn. Now, one path is service to self. One path is looking to manipulate the materium, the world around us, in such a way that they can control it. They can create false synchronicity. They can create false telepathy. They can create, you know, they can open doorways if you want, you know, into different realms of reality or consciousness that are around us at all times. Maybe we're just not perceptive to it because, well, our eyes can only register 80 frames a second in a creation that is going in and out of existence, according to Taoist and other teachings, 22 trillion times a second. So there's a potential of all types of life forms being around us on a different frequency and vibration. And this goes into kind of the Kabbalion quantum physics type stuff, right? And it can affect us. This is where we get stories of, aliens and demons and interdimensionals and all these different things that are very probably real, very real. So if we're looking at it, that we have the potential to be influenced by this, there are those individuals that are seeking to serve themselves, seeking to be God, if you will, and this is what a lot of the WEF are doing, right? They're attempting to enslave humanity with this type of technology, the digital dictatorship. And it will eventually fail because, as I've said, they're attempting to replace a lot of it, they're attempting to replace the feminine aspect of creation, with the feminine being the intuitive, the infinite, the womb of creation that manifests the physical. And they're trying to do their bioengineering, and now we don't need parents. And they're trying to use AI for creativity, and now we don't need human creativity, and all these things. But like all things have balance. And what they don't understand, as I've said, is they're going to create themselves out of creation. It's going to be a lesson. And a lot of people will misinterpret it as God's wrath, and that's their business. I see it in a different view. And a sister shared this with me one time. She said, or shared it, and I was like, God's wrath, in many instances, I always say, we don't need to be concerned with God's wrath. Never fear God. Fear the consequences of our actions when we are out of love and empathy. In other words, fear your pride. Fear your rage and anger when in terror. And fear the consequences that will come about that God will allow us to experience as eternally fierce beings and sparks and children of God in this lifetime, in order to teach us eternal lessons. And there are those people that come in and suffer at the hands of horrific evil. I can't explain it. It's not my, I don't know. But I trust that on some level, these beings are given, these people that suffer this are in service in some way to those people, because eventually there's no escaping it. We will return to love eventually. We will have to suffer to learn empathy. We will have to suffer certain things. It's part of the awakening ascension process. Doesn't mean everybody will get it in this life. In my view, there are many mansions, as they say, many places to go. Look at the stars in heaven, right? And a magnificent mind, such as creators, that I refer to as my heavenly mother and father, would be able to come up with the experiences needed to teach us. And in my view, it's not so much death as it is just transition into a different existence. And we may not see certain people or loved ones for quite some time. But that's where they need to go. And that's why you have so many people on this planet and so many varied degrees of being able to awaken, to be able to empathize, to learn. We're all, where we need to be. And we're all here to help one another, either be the catalyst by being a darkness, and that isn't to justify our negative behavior, or we're here to expand our moral courage, expand our love, expand our empathy in ways that nothing else in creation and no heaven could ever offer us. Now, these people that are service to self and are trying to ascend, if you will, or perfect themselves by tapping into the materium, by focusing on mental energies and their control of it. Here's what I'll say. The other side of that coin is the spiritual ascension. Rather than doing that, It's working on cultivating the heart, which is why in all the old esoteric material they had, Jesus with a heart that was crucified with thorns, because it's in that crucifixion many times in this world, our cross to bear, the things that we go through that expand our empathy. Yes, it can harden people, but it also, in the right circumstances and bad enough, teaches us a level of empathy that we did not have, certain understandings. That's the whole concept of the wounded healer. And in that purification of the soul, by default, when our natural response begins to be empathy, begins to want to understand the other, instead of justify our anger, our rage, our shadow side, if you will, by default, we're going to hold more source love energy, more the Christic energy, if you will. And in that, of course, our DNA, being antenna, being information holders. And in the videos, they talked about this. They talked about the DNA, how did they say it? The new level of storing information is using people's DNA. They can actually pass messages from one to the other within the DNA. So in that, we're all biooscillating crystalline beings, antennas, and depending on our mind, our intent, our will, our heart, it's like the old TV antennas that would turn and pick up a different channel. It's why I say, if you're upset about something, pay attention to how you react in one moment. Take time, take a few days, go in, meditate, go into heart, and pay attention to the different thoughts that come in. Because we're picking up from the ultimate information, the Akashic, the field of energy, all around us at any given time, and we're the channel that's going to allow that to come through. And in that purification process and realizing that we're not the totality, the pinnacle of creation, we begin to surrender our will in such a way that we begin to synchronistically align with other people who have done that, or are going to be a catalyst for us, or we're going to plant seeds for them, that the overall greater mind and creation is able to bring together. In other words, rather than trying to fix reality with our limited view, we surrender that trust to the greater reality, and it begins to bring us into contact with people and events and places and organizing things that our limited perspective could never have gleaned. And that's being part of the overall solution. And if we're looking at it from terms of harmony versus disharmony, well, if you have people that are wanting to oppress other parts of creation, and we're all equally necessary parts of creation, and they're only worried about their own power, their own cultural perspective, their own, eventually, if they're apathetic to the suffering that that desire creates, or what they may discount and hurt, then they're only destined to cause more chaos, to self-destruct. And that's kind of like why we're in the world we're in. Whereas if we're open, we're looking to empathize with the other, we're developing that moral courage, we're developing those virtues, and we've surrendered to the greater, then we're in line with the law of love and free will, and that's the harmony that's required in order for a long-term existence, even a spiritual existence, to happen for us. And, I talk about the law of love and free will. This came to me in meditation a few years ago. It's like, look, if I love someone, then I'm going to honor their free will. They need to learn what they need to learn, express themselves how they want to express themselves, be who they want to be. And as long as their expression does not harm another individual's right to not be harmed, and they're within the law of love, then there's no karmic debt attached. In other words, the only free will that exists is that which doesn't have karmic debt attached to it, because we're not honoring the other life within those two laws, love and free will. And so that's the two big, in my view, the two biggest, that's the two largest paths that we're seeing. Those that are seeing ascension and seeing the evolution and enlightenment through the heart, and using all of life as the teacher, right? It's like I often say, when we can realize that even the bad is still part of creation, and we can walk through life, every single challenge, go, this is an opportunity for me to build my emotional strength, my compassion, my moral courage, my patience, my love, and I can use that. Well, then I align with it in such a way, it's actually a catalyst for my growth. I'm no longer a victim to it. And at that moment, when you do that and you're viewing all of creation that way, every step is sacred, and the earth becomes our church, our synagogue, our mosque, our temple. And in my understanding, that's walking with God. And then the other side is not thinking of those things, wanting to control aspects of creation, wanting to affect the materium because they're in such fear for themselves, and that they're trying to control everything. And the bottom line comes down to realizing, yeah, we may have to suffer for doing the right thing, but are we willing to suffer to ensure that others in the long run suffer less? Can we be the ones that plant seeds? Can we be the one to be that change? But it's also trusting that it's not just us, it's a collective evolution. And that means that every single person is just as important as the other. It just takes releasing the idea of I'm the teacher, I'm the healer, I'm the this, I'm the that, and realizing, yes, we can be those things, but we're also the eternal students first. All of us. And so if we can take this type of path, if you will, if we can take this type of mindset, then it's very easy to discern when are all of a sudden, why am I overly angry? Why am I this? Why am I thinking these negative thoughts? Are they my thoughts? Are they my angers? Am I being influenced from the outside? Is this going to create a consequence that I'm going to have to deal with later? And that's what the ones that are trying to control everything don't want us to do, because then they can deploy their weapon systems against us in such a way that's very easy, because people, that's their normal. They're used to negative thoughts. They're used to anger. They're used to this. They're used to apathy. They're used to wanting to justify negative behavior in the name of God or in the name of the good, which, talking with the individual this morning, it kind of hit hard. But in my understanding, that's the great deception. That's the Antichrist. It's wanting to justify the negative behaviors, the negative attitudes, the negative emotional energies. It's wanting to justify it in the name of righteousness, in the name of Christ, which is synonymous with love to me. And so that would be anti-love, anti-Christ, thinking that it's in line with love, in line with righteousness, that it's what's needed to defeat the evil. And that's part of the great deception. And by doing so, locking us spiritually into a place where we're very easily influenced by negative forces, and we're played. That's a view, right? That's a view of how to battle this first and foremost, before we can figure out ways to mitigate all of the stuff that's being thrown at us. And it's to not bring fear. It's not to be like, oh, everything's lost, and by no means is it. This is also all catalyst, remember, on a greater scale to show us what does not work, so we can then use the wisdoms of our mistakes to then create a better future that will work. And here we are on the planet, able to communicate in ways we never were before, able to learn about the self like never before, and truly deal with that shadow side, that negative side. And in the New Age, I've come in contact, and it's not all the same, right? Not all the same. But where people will go, well, you have to embrace your darkness. You have to embrace your shadow side. And a lot of the New Age people would do that, but what they would do was they would embrace, okay, I don't have to feel bad about my vengeance, my cruelty, my this, my that, because I'm embracing myself as a whole. And the thing is because they haven't had certain experiences to realize that a lot of those emotions can be transmuted, it's not real to them to even talk about it. When somebody shares it, it's not fathomable. It's not real to them. It makes sense. But what they've done is lots of times they will then justify their inner darkness going, well, in the end, it's for the greater good. It will make this person better. But that's a way for them to justify the brutality that they do, because when we truly are reborn and in that place of love, we can't, like there's plenty of negative energy and ignorance on the planet to be a catalyst of evil per se for our growth, that we do not need to be deliberately evil in order to, and justify it by saying, well, it's for your betterment, it's for your this. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of them have fallen victim to, have done. The point to know thyself and the point to not lie about your dark side is so that we can look at it and go, I do not want this in me. I want to practice being a better person. And it's like anything. The more that you practice, eventually it will just be natural to you. And so there's a very big difference between embracing the shadow, embracing our negative side, embracing and knowing thyself to see where our cultural norms are not in line with harmony for everyone, or how we've hurt people, so that we can change it, so we can practice being better, versus embracing it and going, oh, well, I feel good because I don't have to work on myself, because what ego shadow wants to work, it wants to deal with that. And especially as light beings naturally, it feels bad when we hear we're doing bad. And it doesn't feel good, because our greater self does not want to do that. It wants to be on the side of good. It wants to be on the side of love. But the wounds, the shadow, and those aspects of creation that may reinforce that negativity don't want to hear that. Now, I personally meet everybody where they're at. Not everybody's going to be able to get it. Not everybody, I've gone through the, please wake up. And that's why I say learn from me. I was talking about this stuff years ago, where I knew that the Communist Party was in league with certain kingdoms throughout the world and certain religions to subvert the Constitution, our people, and destroy us. I knew that the information on social media was being used as a psychological dossier to understand exactly everybody's preferences. Because with that, they can create the false synchronicities, why it's very important to have discernment. And they're trying to get people to go away from our natural light synchronicity, if you will, to reject it all. And what I'm talking about, and Christians, please, I'm going to talk to you for a minute. You ever taken the Bible, you open it up, and it goes right to the verse that you needed, right to what you were thinking, right to this, right? Well, here's the thing. When you're like, God's talking to me, it's not just the Bible that occurs in. It occurs with everybody that is seeking and aligning with truth on their journey. And everybody is being drawn to the material and to the things that they need for that next step in their own spiritual evolution. And so it happens in the New Age, it happens in First Nation, it happens in everywhere. It will happen all around us. It is a biological matrix of sort. But you have to have discernment to see what is attempting to lead you into anger, into fear, into despair, into these things, and what is wanting to lead you into the virtues of grace. But it's also understanding that going through that process is painful, being reprogrammed, having our old ways of being be rewired within us is a painful process. That's why there's usually tears involved. As I say, one of the most holy things that I can think of that I've seen has been in jungle floors. When you have people coming out of medicine ceremony and they've had to deal with their trauma, with the way that they treated people, with all of it. They're laying in a puddle of their own puke or vomit, their own sweat, their own tears, but they're radiant and vibrant from what they were able to energetically release. And they're coming into a true peace known as the peace of the Lord, the true stillness, the true calmness, where they're not having to meditate to clear the mind. They're naturally in a clear state. And, you know, it's all part of the evolutionary ascension process that is attempted to be hijacked by those who largely don't understand it, have been programmed, are in terror trying to control everything because, you know, in their view, that's the best chance of survival for humanity. And they're wounded. They're lost, right? But it's just honing and using reality, as I said, cultivate that virtue, and being extremely discernful in the meetings, discernful in the synchronicities, discernful in our emotions and our thoughts and our behaviors, so that we then don't have a karmic debt to pay down the road because we're not in line with the law of love and free will. And when we can do this, it makes navigating what they're attempting to throw at us very easy. And like I said, going back, you know, I knew about the UFO stuff. I was not able to articulate things like I am now because I hadn't gone through the years and decades of everything from suicidal ideations, suicidal attempts, you know, just out of my mind, not knowing what was what, because I was all by myself trying to explain this stuff to people. Now, all this information is coming out. Everybody's reacting like and when I was back then, when I was trying to tell people and they're like, you're crazy, now they're like, well, you're crazy because you're telling me not to be angry about it. Well, okay, no, what I'm saying is look how you viewed me. Look how I reacted. Look how I self-destructed. Look at the people that I did. I hurt good people in my reactions because if they weren't willing to listen to me, they were automatically an enemy. And this is where we're at right now in this awakening process with all this information, where people assume if someone talks about the virtues of grace, not being angry, not being this, we need to maintain mercy, we need to maintain critical thought, well, he's automatically the enemy. And if I, you know, empathize and discuss what LGBTQIA has been through and how it's meant to make all LGBT look as the problem, well, then I'm the enemy to some folks on the far right. And if I go to the far right and I'm explaining, hey guys, this is why law enforcement has act certain ways. This is why military has act certain ways. This is why religions act certain ways. Their cultural conditioning, their wounds, then the people on the left go, oh, well, then you're not agreeing with me, so therefore you must be a secret enemy. And you get this place where, you know, empathizing with everyone becomes a problem. And everybody wants to be, you know, to protect their family. Everybody wants to do the best they can to ensure their survival. And they're locked into these emotional conflicts, in particular because of all the psyops and all the information coming out. And what I would say is, please learn from me. Learn from my mistakes. I'm not saying take everything I say as gospel, but what I'm saying is, please do your own research, do your own due diligence, and learn from the mistakes that I made so that you do not make the same mistakes, and hopefully you won't have to go through some of the pains that I went through, because there's some people they have been able to learn. They're able to avoid certain things that I had to go through that were extremely painful. And that's why I offer this to people. And that's, you know, it's to try to pay it forward and go, hey guys, you know, we're all in this together. We truly are. We're all in this together, but we're only going to be able to get through it together with the least amount of suffering if we're doing what we can to empathize and, more importantly, really cultivate our own spiritual character, our own virtue, which is so important to avoid all the stuff they're launching at us. So with that, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to post the videos that I'm discussing on the video in the comments section. Watch them. They're from West Point. They're from the doctor's former DARPA, CIA, all that. And they're telling you this is the technology that is being deployed against you. And oh, by the way, the CCP is probably a little bit more advanced than if you look at Unrestricted Warfare, the document that I posted. If you don't understand this is being used against us, I get it. It's a lot to emotionally take in, but trust that there's light here too. There's good here too. I am living proof of that. You're not alone. We're not alone. And more importantly, as I said, the more that the darkness goes to try to suffocate the light, to go against the creational laws of love and free will, the more it will create itself out of creation for their own lessons. And going back to what I said, this isn't about, to my experience, it's not about God's wrath, God's punishment, God's that. It's about suffering the consequences of our own mistakes and being allowed to suffer the consequences of that. That is many times horrific, to teach us eternal lessons as eternally fierce beings in this life, this experience, this short amount of time. It's $1 million experience you wouldn't pay $1 for many times. And I often say, if hell is for the wicked to suffer, what is this place where the innocent suffer at the hands of the wicked? And it doesn't mean to fear it. It means to learn as much as you can what's going on externally about the self to better navigate through it. And no fear. Much love, guys.